and welcome to Rockhound Talk Live, the only live Rockhound podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. I'm your host, Amber Nicole, and this is my co host, Ben Korn. Hey,
Hi,
Ben, how are
everyone.
you?
Oh, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Excited to bring our new guest out tonight and learn a bit more about Montana minerals and agates and her lapidary work. So, how have you been?
Yeah, I've been great. Just trying to do some winter stuff, clean up around the house, and I just organized like a ton of my rocks, which is always a huge undertaking. So, I'm really happy to like finally have that done. I actually finished getting everything into my fluorescent display case, which was really nice because I had used that for our Mineral Club show back in September.
Yeah.
And so it's just sort of been sitting in my house empty for like a few months. So finally able to get that together, which is really great.
Yeah. And you have your little setup, your little cleaning station setup. I know you were working on that as well.
Yeah, that's one thing that I really need to do some more of is I've got a bunch of stuff that I found that I need to try to like go through and get, cleaned and, sort of prepped and like all that stuff.
Yeah. So, yesterday you sent me an article about some news in the paleontology world about a new find of a T Rex species in New Mexico. Is that right?
Yeah, sort of. It's actually a relative of T-Rex.
Okay.
I'm trying to pull up the exact name, which I'm probably gonna butcher anyways. But it's a type of tyrannosaur. They're calling it Maastrichtian. Um, it's Maastrichtian. So this actually predates a T-Rex by like 6 to 7 million years, and it was
Wow.
apparently much larger. So they found these fossils that they thought were originally T-Rex in New Mexico, and then they were able to go through and determine that it was actually a new species.
Oh, yeah. And that was, what did you say, 6 to 7 million years before the one that we previous knew, right?
Yeah, 6 to 7. So
Six
it
to seven.
was
Yeah, that's a long time.
yeah, so they think it's like 73 or like 70 million years ago,
Wow.
which is, before the T-Rex.
And then we were talking, you were saying that we as humans are closer to the T Rex than Stegosaurus, correct?
Yeah, it's one of the sort of common misconceptions that people think like all of the dinosaurs that they see in movies, or maybe they've seen some of the like famous, like fossils or even some like dinosaur cartoons. People think that the dinosaurs like all just sort of live together, and that's actually not the case. So the Stegosaurus lived um, further away from the T Rex than we actually live right now to the T Rex.
That's
So
incredible.
yeah, so one of the things that I was just reading about trying to get my, like different periods right and everything was there were Stegosaurus fossils when T Rex came about, which
That,
is kind of crazy.
yeah, when you think about, especially with the inaccuracies of the movies, it doesn't seem quite right. But it is interesting that there were already on the ground fossils by the time T Rex came. That's that's unbelievable, actually. Um, and then what were we saying? What else we were mentioning that? Or did we confirm with the? Did we mention what period? Oh, the Cretaceous. Yes, you did mention that.
Yeah, they're Cretaceous. So
Yeah.
yeah, and if like I've mentioned too, there's some really cool spots in Montana that you can find some dinosaur bones. I've actually found T-Rex bones myself. I didn't get to keep any of them, but there's some really cool places. It's the Hell Creek Formation in Montana.
Yeah, and you know what's actually honestly something really cool that I learned, which we'll dive more into when we have Chase Pipes on our show later this season, which is exciting. He did an episode on maybe it was a few years ago on his YouTube channel, and they were talking about just how like there are literally just an insane amount of dinosaur fossils such as like stegosaurus, just all over, just sitting and like breaking down from weatherization that, unfortunately we can't collect, legally. But and kind of just how unfortunate that is that there are so many out there that we aren't able to collect, that we can learn from, and just there's enough for like all of us to have. Like that just blew my mind, because when we think about dinosaur bones, I don't know, I just think about like, in my mind they just seem so rare to find. So it's
Yeah, there's actually a lot of spots. I've talked to some of the people in Montana that they've said, like they'll find dinosaur bones on like the BLM land, and they'll talk to like the BLM office, and they'll say like, "Hey, like I found, some bones. I didn't touch them. Here's where they're at, like all that kind of stuff." And then they kind of go, okay, like if we can get someone out there, like we'll kind of get to it. But a lot of times they don't, because if it's not something that's like a significant thing, there's not really a reason to go out there. It's sort of like if you ever go to Dinosaur National Monument in Utah, there's sort of a really cool um, display that they have where it's literally like the rock with all the fossils in it, and they just sort of have this huge, it's just basically a huge wall of fossils. And a lot of people go and they go like, wow, like there's so many fossils and this is really cool and whatever. And I think what people are kind of missing is like there's so many fossils, and they've sort of gotten the information they need from them, and they're not like actively excavating them.
right,
Like
right.
there's a lot of stuff that they just sort of like disappear. And I think it brings up a lot of like the ethical questions that people have too about like private, um trying to do like private lands and people being able to collect and um sell fossils and all of that.
Hmm.
It's sort of tough because it's like there's a part where it's like, yes, people should be able to get academic information from them,
Yeah.
but if we don't have enough money for all of the people in the paleontological world to go out and collect these fossils. So what's going to happen? They literally will just turn to
Yeah.
dust.
Yeah. So like, I
Um,
mean, we should be able to, within reason, be able to collect these without such restrictions. It's unfortunate. I
yeah,
just
yeah, it's something that like I listened to a talk from, it was actually a British paleontology um uh, professor that was in Montana, and he was working with the BLM office out of Miles City, Montana, and they had
okay.
found, I don't remember what kind of dinosaur it was, but he had found this. They had been contacted by a farmer that said, "We have a dinosaur fossil on our land. We need someone to come and get it." And they had to basically run out there, get it in a jacket, excavate it, throw it in the back of a pickup, and like get it out of there. And they had to do all of that because it was in this gully. And if they didn't get it out that season, the rains would have come and literally just washed away the fossil.
Oh wow.
So there's a lot of, people sometimes think like, oh, like these fossils have been around for millions of years and they're just going to still sit around for millions of years. But a lot of times they're really fragile and they'll just sort of break apart and disappear if no one does anything with them.
Right. Yeah, that's too bad. If you're watching, shoot us a comment just so we know that you can hear us, and that you're following along. If you have questions along the way, we like to interact with you guys. So definitely include your questions so that we can, dive more into Sally's journey and her experience, which tonight we will have Sally Bleck, a Montana miner and lapidary artist, on with us. She does an amazing job with her cabochons. Just her lapidary work is impressive. I came across her on Instagram and was just really impressed with, like, you think about like the heart of a rockhound and just like that free spirit, exploring and loving the outdoors. Like, that's Sally. Like, she is like when you think about a rockhound, that I just imagine her like she's such a diehard. So excited to have her on and to learn more about her. Yay! It looks like we've got some comments coming through. Hey Wayne, thanks for commenting.
Yeah, yeah, we it seems like we've been having some issues with some of the Facebook connections for some reason.
Yes, it's
So,
always Facebook. Come on,
yes.
get it together.
Yes, yeah, we are live on Instagram. So hi to the one person that was on us viewing us on Instagram. We got YouTube and Facebook going. So thank you to everyone making comments right now. Hi,
Yes,
Rolf,
appreciate it.
Tony, Wayne. Yes, we really appreciate it just to make sure that everything's working out well. So
Yes.
yeah, I'm excited to talk about Sally. Like Amber said, she's a huge Rockhound lapidary artist, and she also does some really cool embroidery too. We'll see if
Oh
she
yeah.
talks some about that too. So,
Yeah. So let's bring her
um,
on in.
Hello.
Hey,
Hi.
how are
Happy to be
you?
here. Good. How are you?
Doing well. Excited to
Good.
hear more about your journey and just some of your
Yeah.
experiences.
Thank
I hear such great things about whenever, I mentioned you or tagged you, reposted you, or just even like on some of my Instagram posts and comments from, followers of yours. Always such great things
you.
to say. So
Thank
excited to learn
you.
more about you. So why don't you tell us a bit about how you became a rock hound? Tell us about your journey and how you've gotten to where you are today.
Yeah. Well, I like to joke that I was never given a choice. My dad got into it by some older rockhounds that lived in the same town as him. And so from day one, I was just going up there or to the claim that he used to dig with them. And definitely when I was a little kid, I took it for granted and I like got tired of it and I'd rather be in town playing with my friends and I would still go up there with them. And then I got a little out of it in high school and got back into it post high school.
I hear a lot about that from
Mm-hmm.
a lot of rock hounds who started off young, that there's like this phase where they kind of just, it's not cool, it's not what they want to
Yeah.
do, and then
Mm-hmm.
they end up finding their way back. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's awesome because it's obviously attributed to, parents that got you started young and how important that is to get your kids out into nature. So like, whatever changes come in life, like, nature, rock hounding, whatever it is, outdoors, brings you back
Mm-hmm.
in. So that's cool.
Definitely.
So you also mentioned that you were named after one of
Yeah.
your dad's greatest finds. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. So, one of the claims that he dug at's a private claim here in Montana. He dug it for a few years and just like hit it really hard. And then he finally got lucky one summer. And it happened to be the summer I was born, just, within a month or two after I was born. And it took him 5 days to extract the pocket. It ended up being about 2,000 amethyst scepters, which is crazy. Like, I've never found anything close to that. And he always says that I was his lucky charm for that.
Oh,
But
aw.
he did already, or both my parents already named me after the claim prior to that, obviously.
Yeah,
But
that's
it was a place
cool.
they both fell in love with. And I think it was like a neutral name, too. It wasn't like anyone's choice. So
That's
it worked
awesome.
well. Yeah.
So you came back into rock hounding after adolescence,
Hmm.
in your young adulthood, and what kind of brought you back into it?
Yeah, just wanting to tap back into something from my childhood, hearing some friends kind of like start to dip their toes in it, and me being like, well, I already have the in on that. Um, so yeah, I started digging again. I went up with my mom for the first time. I think it was in like 2012, just a couple years after high school. And then that was when I was like, oh, I remember doing this. And then I
Yeah.
started going up more and more. And then I started kind of dipping my toes in other minerals in the state. Yeah, anything shiny is kind of what I like to look for.
so what are
Yeah.
some of the minerals and rocks and things that you found in Montana?
Yeah, some of my favorites have been amethyst, of course, and then smoky quartz. I grew up digging sapphires too. That's actually the only mineral I've ever like beat my dad's find on. And then that's like always the goal is to like one up him. And
Wait,
then,
real quick on your sapphire, like what was your
yep,
largest?
it was a 13.1.
That's
I
pretty
Hmm.
big.
That's
Yeah, 12 years
impressive.
old.
12?
Yeah, it was actually
It's
a
always
bucket.
those darn kids. It's always
Yeah,
the kids, and they don't even
yeah.
care. They're like, oh, okay.
No. Well, and it's funny because you look at it and it's so big that your eyes almost, because they're used to finding smaller, and your eyes almost go over it, and then they go back and they're like, whoa, is that just like glass? And it was a sapphire, so that was really
It's
special.
incredible.
And then I like to get highlight opal and then some agates, of course, and calcite. We have some fun fluorite in the state. Um, yeah, tourmaline, schorl.
It's like everything great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is everything in the
So
state.
let me ask you, just in the
Mhm,
minerals that you just mentioned, and you say the state, it's a big state. Are we talking
mhm.
like a wide range where you're finding these minerals? Is there like kind of a general
Yeah,
location?
no, not at all, I wouldn't say. Because even the quartz, we have more than one batholith, so you can get, those can vary a lot, at least like a few hours apart. And then obviously or I shouldn't say obviously, but the agate, the really good Montana agate, comes from eastern Montana, and that's like a 7-hour drive from me right here.
Okay.
So it's not even a day trip.
So you really just go all over the state then.
I don't do a ton of agate collecting, but most of my spots are within 3 hours of Bozeman.
Okay. Okay. And where's is that Bozeman? Is that like center, north,
Pretty
south?
central.
Okay.
Yeah, a little central south, but
You're
central.
what, like an hour and a half north of Yellowstone Park?
An hour.
Hour? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of depending what direction you go. But yeah.
So I do have to ask, so that big sapphire that you found, what did
Hmm.
you guys end up doing with it? Did you
Yeah.
just like keep it or did you facet
Yeah.
it? Like what'd you do?
No, I still have it. I want to facet it someday. When I was a little girl, I thought it would be like on my ring and a wedding band already, but I'm not married, so like it's kind of funny. It's just sitting in a tube in my house.
So
Yeah.
they don't have
Someday
a
I will cut it though.
yeah, someday when something exciting hits you or something that
Yes.
moves you, then you've got it.
Yep, it's
Okay,
ready. It's waiting.
definitely need to update us whenever you cut
Yeah,
that. Whenever you do something
I
with it, like
will.
we totally want to see what you do with that.
I will,
I
definitely.
saw there was a question on here from Rolf who asked, how did you start out in lapidary?
Yeah, the same thing. My dad's mentor, his name was Leland, and he did a lot of lapidary. So my first kind of like introduction was just all these old guys in the Rockhound Club, like bringing what they made. I got this bolo from one of them, not Leland, another gentleman, when I was really little. And so I still have that to this day. When I was 14, I went to a camp in Du Bois, Wyoming, and I actually learned how to do lapidary there. And that's where I made my first like belt buckle and pendant, and I made a pin for my mom. And then it wasn't until like 5 years ago, I started visiting a family friend's shop here in Bozeman. And I would just go over like once every 6 months, even, and just kind of play around. And then a year ago, they invited me over and wanted to really like teach me more and more how to do it. And so I just kind of dove right in. Um, yeah,
And
I
how
got
old
a
are
lot of
you?
my, I'm 31, so I did that, started when I was 30.
Oh, just the lapidary in the last year.
Yeah, well, I
Wow.
started publicly selling for
Okay.
1 year. Yeah,
Okay.
and then my first like was when I was like 13, 14.
Okay. Okay. I was gonna say because you do really well for just 1 year experience.
Yeah. No, and also I think just being around the material my whole life because I've seen agate forever. And it's
Yeah.
kind of funny because we always, like, my dad was into amethysts and sapphires, not agate. So we weren't going to go drive, that was 9 hours from us in Helena
Right. You mean
for
when
that when
you
we could drive an hour for like
r-
amazing amethysts.
right, right, right.
Hmm.
Totally can understand that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now most of
So
your lapidary work though, is that mostly agate though?
Yeah, I'm making my niche Montana minerals, so I cut a few other things, but I'm not finding a ton of other people cutting just Montana agate. There's a
Mhm.
ton of like turquoise cutters and a lot of like jasper cutters. So I am just focusing on Montana agate since no one seems to like be selling a ton of that.
Yeah, they're
Not
so
on the
pretty.
Instagram world, I should say.
Yeah.
So you did mention doing some rock hounding like with your dad. So I did want to bring
Mhm.
up. So we got some photos that you had sent.
Yes.
So
Yep.
what? Tell me about these photos. What are these?
Yeah, so those are both from the claim that I grew up digging that I'm actually named after. The one on the right, it used to look a lot like that, where it was just like a few mounds of dirt and really forested, and now it's just all dirt.
Oh,
It
wow.
looks a lot like, if you know of Crystal Park, it looks like that now. And then the photo on the left is my dad would bring up, or he would let me bring my friends up. So that's me and a friend behind him in a hole. And I think a lot of the, like, his digging with a little kid was me, like, bugging him, asking, like, what's in there? Like, I'd always ask him to put dirt in the shaker so I could, like, get all the crystals out. And I don't think I realized, like, how much hard work he had to do that to let me have the best part. But he did. He always shared that with me.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And then that top left photo, that gentleman in that is actually Leland, and he's the guy who got my dad into rock hounding. And he actually passed away about a year and a half ago. And
Oh,
he and left all his like rocks and a lot of his lapidary equipment to me and my dad.
oh,
So
wow.
like a lot of the agate I use came from stuff he collected, and so it's been really special working through it.
And that photo on the bottom, then is that just like you
Mhm.
guys having a picnic next to the creek? Is that the creek
We're
that?
gold panning.
Ah,
Oh,
So that's,
okay.
yep, that's a different spot. When I was a little kid, my dad was really into gold panning. And then when I got a little older, I mean, crystals took over and sapphires. And so I actually have like never gold panned as an adult, but we used to do it when I was a kid. And then that top right photo was just a random dig in the Boulder batholith.
Okay. And then is this
Yeah.
your shop that you have?
Not my shop. It's my mentor's shop. It's a family friend, and they've known my parents longer than I've been alive. They know them each other through like the rock hounding community. They were agate hunters who wanted to get into crystals and sapphires, and they bought a sapphire claim. And so my dad helped them dig it and kind of taught them kind of the ropes in that realm. And so they kind of took me under their wing and have been teaching me agate. So it's been fun to watch that go full circle. But they have an amazing shop, and the amount of thought that it's a woman and a man, and the amount of thought that they've both put into just curating like where things go just shows to like how many years they've spent like working in a shop. Just like they even have machines tilted so it's just convenient to like work in them, and things I would have never done like without their leadership.
and so Ralph also asked, since we're talking about, cabochons and you working on different rocks, like what's your favorite rock or gem to work with?
Yeah, definitely agate, the Montana agate. Yeah, and there's that case full of it. And
Yeah.
then that photo on the far right, that's actually a photo of a bookcase from Leland's house. It's really hard to describe, but his whole house basically looked like a version of that. So when you talk about like a true rockhound, someone who like breathed, slept, like
Uh huh.
all they cared about was rocks, that was Leland. Like you would try to talk to him about like the weather, and somehow that would loop back around to like the geology like we're standing on or something.
I
Like he
love it.
couldn't, yeah, he just couldn't have a conversation outside of that. And just like I wish I would have documented his home before it all got like moved out and stuff, because it was truly incredible just spinning around. And like he didn't even have a couch, he just had display cases and like some chairs, and it was really remarkable like how much you can put into this hobby.
So were
Yeah.
those all like USGS reports and like just rock hounding books then?
Yeah, so it's was a combination of books he's collected throughout his 80 years slash every single article that had anything to do with geology throughout his entire lifetime that he came across in any of his readings, newspapers, like Life magazines, he cut out and put into those books and had them oral categorized. So he had books on North Dakota, he had books on Mississippi, he had books on Wisconsin, and it's all just like filed into these like really organized literature. And it's so amazing because I'll look through them and I'll find articles from like the 40s, and
Oh, wow.
deposits that like people have kind of forgotten, and it's a
Right.
really wonderful resource, and it's like kind of
Yeah.
this little treasure trove that like the world never knew about, but just existed.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And these look like some just different crystals and things you found. So
Yeah.
where are these from?
Yeah, those are all actually 3 different locales. The 2 photos on either end, one is from the Boulder Batholith and the other is from the Pioneer Batholith. So the Pioneer Batholith would be Crystal Park, which is very famous here in Montana. And that's actually my biggest crystal find from that location is that photo on the right. And then that middle guy is just some calcite from here in Montana.
So,
Okay,
I was going
did
to ask,
you?
are these locations private or are they public?
The Boulder Batholith one is private. The other 2 are public locales.
And I think you sent a video of the crystal.
I did.
Let
Yep.
me bring that up.
Strength on it, the whole thing wiggled. Yep.
Jeez. This is so cool.
My friend's sighing because I told him to dig there.
But this was when you were digging out and then you just found it.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
That's like
That's
as big as
so sweet.
And that was a smoky quartz or amethyst?
Yeah, no, smoky quartz.
Oh, gosh,
Yep.
look at that. Oh,
Yeah,
gorgeous.
it weighed in at 2 pounds, which was really cool. And then it had a little sidecar right next to it that I had extracted just like moments before that video.
So tell me, when you're digging, for example, for quartz crystals like that, what are some of the indicators that you're looking for, before you decide, like, this is an area where I want to start digging?
Yeah. So at that specific spot at Crystal Park, it's an alluvial dig. It's a little harder. There's still pockets, but it's a little more like luck and
Okay.
and then hard work. Like the more dirt you move, the more you're gonna find.
Yeah.
I will say at that spot, a lot of people get so worked up, or not worked up. They get so like gung ho on digging into a wall, when a lot of times like the reason why that wall exists is because there was something good in front of it that someone already dug. So maybe instead of going past where they were, dig down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's how I found that rock. So I always start like any hole I get in, I usually like take out another foot or 2 under me and then I
Okay.
go in.
Mhm.
Just because I don't know, you never know like
So you're
if they're
going,
just extracting it, they
Yeah.
could have been on something good and they just went over instead of searching
down.
a little
Yeah,
more.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
But if you're in the Boulder Batholith, there's a lot more hard rock digging, and in there you're just looking for pegmatite,
Okay.
anything exposed, looking for shards on the ground too, and all of that.
Okay.
And these are some other photos that you had sent. So is the one on the left, is that you like at a show like selling some, I think some of your embroidery?
Yeah, so I sell both my embroidery and my lapidary at shows, and I love to talk to little kids, and sometimes it's hard to talk about your art. So when little kids come and look at rocks, it's so nice. I can be like, "Isn't it shiny?" Or like I ask them if they're a rockhound, and then I always like talk to their parents and like tell them about some local spots they can take the kids to if they're into that sort of thing.
Yeah, I've seen some of your embroidery. It's so cool. Like, I love
Thank
your
you.
hats. Like, very,
Yeah,
very
I'm wearing
cool.
one
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, very, very
Yeah.
cool.
And then this was one that you had sent a couple days ago. It looks like it has a bunch of like manganese dendrites. Is there
Yeah,
anything
yep.
special with this?
You know, I was looking for highlight opal and came across those, and it like stopped me in my tracks, and I was like, I don't even need to look for anything else. I found it. It was just fun. I've never seen ones that big, and it just like I know they could exist, but I've just never seen them in person, and I was just like, they do exist. So it was really fun to stumble upon. I was also at about, gosh, 95 to 10,000 feet, so we were up pretty high on a ridge where it was.
Okay. Yeah, I actually found it was some manganese dendrites in it was in actually a tailings pile in Montana in
Okay.
I think it's Castle is like the ghost town that's up there. But there was
Okay.
an old copper mine and I was going through some of the
Yep.
tailings and I found a piece. I mean, it was like at least a foot like long, like piece
Sweet.
of limestone that has just these gorgeous just dendrites like coming up. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, they're so fun when you find them.
Yeah, there's so much out in Montana to just
Mm-hmm.
explore that, like, I'm a little jealous. Like, I try and make it back to Montana once a year, but I know, like, where you're at, there's just so much to do. Do you have, like, a favorite spot then that you go to a lot to try to find
Oh
stuff?
gosh. I don't know if I go there so much, but my favorite spot would be where I'm named after for sure, just because I've been going there for so long. But uh, yeah, just court spots are probably my favorite,
Yeah.
just in general.
Do you ever collect fossils, dinosaur bones, any of that?
You know, I never have, but I've been up to like Malta and on the High Line, and then even eastern Montana. I stumbled across a deposit of fossils once, and it was pretty high up in the mountains, and I can't tell you where because they're like my spot. But my friend found an ammonite up there, and I was so jealous,
What?
and it even had a little of like
Stop
that
it.
opalized sheen on it. And I've been back there a few times and haven't found anything close to that.
So how big was it? Because I've seen people in
It
Montana
was
find like
little.
small. Okay, because
Yeah, it
we
was
we
little.
actually had. So I went to my undergrad at Rocky Mountain College in Billings, Montana,
Okay.
and
Nice.
they had in the basement. I guess it was like the world record for whatever
Okay.
species of ammonite it was, and
Yep.
it was on a pallet, and it took up the entire pallet. And
Okay.
I was like,
Damn.
I had like just imagining that creature just floating in the water, just going along. I'm like, I just can't even imagine like something like that. That's crazy.
And
But
someone with water fears like me, I don't need to know those things existed.
So you don't,
Yeah.
I take it you don't like do much like panning or any kind of stuff like that then. Okay.
No, no. I'm an alpine kid.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
so you did have one other video of some quartz, I think.
Yeah.
So where was this from?
This is digging with my dad at where I'm named after that private claim. This was just this last summer. So every year for his birthday, we dig around like his birthday. And that was just our daddy-daughter dig from last year.
Okay, and those look like it's a bunch of smoky quartz that you're
Yeah,
pulling out
yep.
then?
And that's a fun video too, because I always call it kind of a peanut butter layer, and you can really see how it's like that really clay layer where they're
Yeah.
popping out of.
Yeah.
And so that's actually a good indicator. Whenever I see that layer and it gets a little more clay-like and sticky, I
Yeah,
just
peanut
follow
butter, yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's very similar like that when I've been digging and in New York for Herkimer's. You can see kind
Yeah.
of like a little peanut butter, kind of sandy, clayish kind of consistency, and you want to keep staying there and digging for sure.
But you're going through hard rock, right? And you're just
Well, no,
following that
there's
seam.
some
Not at
alluvial.
that point.
Well, there's
Okay.
alluvial deposits too.
Okay.
So yeah, so
Okay.
it's a mixture of both in dolostone and in the soil as well.
Okay.
I think most people associate the mining there with the hard rock, but
Mm.
there are some mines that are like anomalies, like dirty diamond diggers, that you just
Okay.
literally dig into the dirt and then get into the clay, and you're just like pulling out these gorgeous crystals. So they do have both.
Cool. It is fun to just wipe the clay off and really see that like
And then you
window
see that
under
little
time.
window, that
Mhm.
that faceted part. You're just like, oh.
Yup.
Yeah, I get that a lot too. Even just like in Montana looking for agates where you see something that you're like, I think this might be an agate, and you like flip it
Mhm.
over or start digging it out, and then you're just like, oh, like this is like way bigger than I thought. I was out near Terry, Montana, and I found it was just a little bit like sticking up like that, and I dug around it, and it was like a pound and a half agate. Like it was crazy.
Dang.
That's
Like
great.
you
That's
just
so
never
cool.
know.
Nope. No. Did that one have any dendrites or anything in it?
No, it was actually really
Okay.
odd. I wish I had it like near me, but it's actually because like most of the Montana agates aren't banded, but
Hmm.
this had like a bunch of like bands. It was like a bunch of quartz,
Okay.
but it had like a bunch of bands in it. It's actually pretty
Cool.
cool. like, yeah, you just usually don't see, banded agates in
Not that
Montana.
big.
Yeah, yeah. So, is there anywhere then that you are like bucket list? Like, I really, really want to like dig here or something to collect.
Just in Montana,
Oh, well, I
or
guess anywhere.
oh gosh. Um, oh, that's so hard. I am a little bit of a Montana snob, so like I would, um, I really want to find some Montana corundum and
Ooh.
slice it and kind of sell it like they sell the tourmaline slices. That's on my bucket list. There's some private claims I'd really like to go to, but those I have to like hope I find like someday get an invite. Um, Yeah. And then I would love to go to Australia or like anywhere in the Alps. Those are definitely on my bucket
French
list.
Alps, like going in and like
Like the
climbing those
Swiss.
mountains
Yes,
oh,
yes.
that is
That's,
my
yeah.
literal bucket list. Like I have to do that before I die. If I don't, like I will be disappointed
Yep. I
in
like
my
that's the only reason
afterlife.
I want to learn like alpinism and like I'm slowly kind of dipping my toes in climbing and the only interest is like so I can transcribe that through rockhounding. I don't like want to go to 12 climbs or anything.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I know
like
some
I
people like Colorado will even go like, like mountaineer up mountains to try to find like crystal pockets and stuff. And
Yep.
I can't imagine. Like some of it I'm like, okay, if it's like a really expensive, like small crystal, I can kind of get it. But I'm used to like I'll go on the Yellowstone River and I'll find 2 5-gallon buckets full of agates. I'm like, there's no way I could like carry that, like rappel you
Yeah.
down a mountain or something like that.
Yep. Or if you do, you're gonna cry by the time you get to the car because your back
right.
hurts so bad.
Yeah, I've done that. So, I just wanted to show you had some lapidary videos too. Oh, that's not a lapidary video. This one.
Cheapers, guys. Look
Oh,
how
the
weird this one
audio.
is. It's like two stones that were sealed together, which with that crystal center. Yeah, what a funky one.
So that was it looks like one of the Montana agates you were cutting.
Yeah.
And then you sent this video. Are those
Ooh, look
weren't
at that.
slices off that rock, were they?
No, that's a different rock. That was one I actually cut like just a week ago, and it's one of my
So
favorite ones I've cut
pretty.
in a hot
Yeah.
minute, and it reminds me of little bacon slices.
Bacon, yeah.
Yes, but
That's
So
that one
so
was
funny.
a really beautiful.
so when you slice them like that, do you then make them into cabochons or you do like other things with
Yeah.
them?
So that specific specimen will just be left as slabs because they're so good. I could make more money if I chopped them up, but I think part of being a rockhound is knowing when to keep it as a specimen because you won't come across another one like that. So that one I am going to keep as specimens. But
Okay.
most of them I do cap, I will say.
Yeah,
Okay.
those
And
Yeah,
are
and so
then,
these
gorgeous.
are
Oh, so
were you making
pretty.
yeah.
this into like a set or were you doing like what did you do with these?
Yeah. So those were two sets, and I actually gave those away on Instagram last month or so.
Oh, nice.
But I really like those cuts. The pear on the right in the middle is like one of my favorite cuts I've done in a while.
Yeah, so do you make anything with the cabs like
I
necklaces or earrings?
don't. No, I've made some earrings with like tumbled pieces we have, but I don't like metalsmithing, so I just leave it to people who are better
Yeah.
at it. And I just play with rocks. But
And anyone that's watching, if they're interested in purchasing your cabs, is it best to go through on Instagram or
it
your website?
is.
Okay.
Yeah, right now I'm only selling cabs through my Instagram stories. Someday I'll graduate to my website, but right now I'm happy there. Yeah.
And your Instagram is Sally Ann Creek Co.
Well, that's my embroidery. So my
That's
rocks
embroidery.
is
Okay.
actually, I know it's so confusing. It's like a handle for everything. But my rocks is just Sal Diggs, Montana. And it's just
And
empty.
just for
Got it.
anybody watching, that will also be linked in the YouTube video that this will be posted on, so that if you need a quick reference, it will be tagged into this video.
And I actually just commented it as
Oh,
well.
perfect.
So if you
Perfect.
are
Thank you.
on any of our platforms, you can check out more of Sally's Lapidary stuff on there. Okay.
I was just looking to see here if there's any questions. You are you on Facebook? If someone doesn't have an Instagram,
Yeah, I do
Yes,
have a
okay.
Facebook page, and it should all cross over, and like all my
Okay.
stories should post
Yeah.
both places.
So you mentioned when you were sort of starting to learn, or maybe it was with your dad or something, you mentioned something about a club. Like, is there a local club that you're involved with?
Yeah, I'm still a part of the Helena Club where I grew up digging, but Bozeman has a club. Almost every town in Montana has a club. I need to get more active in the Bozeman Club again, but
Okay. Yeah, I know. I actually was just seeing, I read that I think Great Falls, Montana is about to get a club. They're looking at starting
okay,
one. Um,
interesting.
and then actually one of Amber's guests from season one, Eddie White,
Oh yeah.
who does
Okay,
guiding and things for
yep,
Montana
yep.
Agates, he actually had helped start the club in Miles City.
Yep.
So
I don't know him, but it's a small like Rockhound state, so I know of him. But yeah, he's like one of the few people who does like guiding rockhounding trips in the state.
yeah, he's got some really interesting stories because, as I'm sure you know, some people are very protective of their
Yeah.
spots, even if
Oh
it's
yes.
just public land. So he's got stories of people getting really upset because he takes them to gravel bars in the middle of the river, and people, for some reason, think they own
They
it,
own the
which
river, yeah.
yeah, and in Montana, anything up to the high water mark is considered the river. So it's nuts that anyone would think something in the middle of the river is their, property, that they have some kind of control over it. But it's
Yeah.
also like it's public, and like why would you not want people to get out and enjoy it? And
Yeah.
I mean, not to disparage Montana agates, but they're one of the most plentiful agates I've ever run across. If
Yeah.
anyone out there wants to find agates, go to Montana because it is almost impossible to not find agates. They're everywhere.
Well, that's refreshing to know because I've not made it there, so
Yeah.
I'm glad to know that.
Yeah, they're not running out. And that's just one of those like egotistical personality things because you run into that with crystal digging too, where
Oh
like in the
yeah.
Boulder Batholith, like there's digs right off roads and people get very heated, or there's drama about like someone says they're gonna claim it and they put a sign up, but like the paperwork was never submitted, and stuff like that happens like more often. And
It's so
when people
crazy.
get like that and they like sometimes it blows up bigger and more people hear about it, it just puts like a bad name for the whole
It
community
does.
instead
It
of
does. It does.
just like
And
highlighting.
it's interesting that you say that because just whether on the show or in private when I do like pre-interviews, like it's so crazy the like kind of rockhound drama pettiness that literally happens in every state, every locale within the state. Like I mean, I live in the Great Lakes area and like there's like drama about literal rocks on the beach. Like it's the beach. Like this is a beach that like you don't own the water, you don't own the rocks on the beach. Like and it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
these are just rocks, guys. So but it's like but that blows me away. We're talking rocks, but when you start talking about some of the minerals that can be very pricey, not that I think it's okay, but I can see where some of the pettiness comes in because you're talking about, money, in terms of the quality and the price that some of these things go for. But like something is like agates, not that agates are expensive. I'm just saying, but they're rocks, guys, that you find on, you know, on the side of a creek, a river, a lake, it's like,
Yeah.
relax.
Yeah,
Well,
I've seen stories on some of the like different mineral groups on Facebook of people saying they were out looking for the fluorescent sodalite in
Yes.
Michigan,
It
and
gets
someone
so
was on the
nasty.
beach looking with their flashlight, and they said, like, I want to respect them, and so they went, half a mile ahead of them, and the person got upset because they were, like in their lane and, trying to get ahead of them to get all their rocks. And
Oh
it's like,
my lord.
they are everywhere out there and they're not that valuable. Like,
No.
despite what some people think, like, they're really
Just
not that
rocks.
expensive. And
Just
like,
rocks.
for people to get so worked up and not also just like want to share the hobby with people, like, people
Yeah.
are clearly there because they also like it. And instead of
Yeah.
being like, hey, like, what are you doing, like, what light you're using, like, what have you found, whatever,
Yeah.
they're just like, they choose the whole like, I'm just going to be negative and you can't be here even though it's a public beach. And I
Yeah.
guess I don't understand that like mentality of like
Me either.
trying to control the hobby, like gatekeep the hobby and the
Gatekeeping.
spots that are public.
That's the
I
worst.
I think part of that too is just like not being taught otherwise. Like some people have no excuses, but I see a lot of young people just in Montana who are like getting into digging and they want to be like these influencers, or they don't want to have like their claims right away and they haven't put any time into like maybe learning ethics or just like how to even file a claim, and then like watching them get mad when someone like leads them astray or like takes over their dig because they showed the wrong person.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, just like, but like you said, if you're not talking to fellow rockhounders on the beach, then you can't learn those things either if you're
Yeah.
new.
Yeah.
But
Like
that is
it's
like the
so
gatekeeping.
yeah, community is so important to the foundation of this hobby that I mean it to gatekeep or to have that kind of mentality just really tears down kind of the important aspects of why people not just because we love the rocks, but the experiences and the connections that we make that are special. So yeah, it's good to
Yeah,
hear that we're
we've
all on the same page.
Yeah, we've talked about mineral clubs, and those are a great way to like learn some of those things and also just find out about new locations. And one of the things I was going to ask then, so if someone like sees all the crystals and things, and I know you mentioned that there's some locations that you go to that are private, like what are some spots that you would recommend like people go and check out in Montana? Like I'm assuming Crystal Park might be one.
Yeah, that's definitely like by far number one. So you can buy, it's $5 per day per person to dig there, and you can spend all day. It's out of service and there's no ATMs close, so you do need to make sure you have cash on hand. But it's super affordable. You're guaranteed to find a crystal. It's huge. There's lots of people there to talk to if you are a newbie. Go find someone who looks like they know what they're doing and say hi. Most of the time, everyone's really nice up there.
And have
And
you been there and found like good like crystals then?
yeah, so that big one is from that location in that video. And then I've never found like amazing, amazing amethyst there, but I have found hints of purple and some scepters. But it's a really cool locale. And it's another alluvial locale, so you can just kind of dig and scratch. It's not like hard rock mining, so it's a good introduction. And then honestly, like agate hunting on the Yellowstone in eastern Montana, not in Yellowstone Park. I think people sometimes get that a little mixed up. You're not collecting inside the park. And
Yeah, and
then,
I've talked with some people too. Like they've actually looked at sort of the ages of the gravels that you can find Montana agates in, and the
okay,
volcanism is more of the Absaroka volcanics, which is
okay.
older than the Yellowstone volcano. So a
Hmm.
lot of people think that because there's the Yellowstone River and there's Yellowstone Park and the
Hmm.
volcano, and then there's agates that you find on the Yellowstone River. They think it's all interconnected, but it's actually the agates are coming out of the mountains in the area, those volcanic areas, and not necessarily from the Yellowstone volcano. So I think that's one thing that like a lot of people sort of misunderstand. But yeah, those are I really think that anyone that wants to get good at finding other agates, like I've noticed finding Lake Superior agates became a lot easier for me when I started going and doing more Montana agates because I used to live in Montana. And
Hmm.
there's sometimes they're really easy to find. In Minnesota, because we actually do get Montana agates in Minnesota.
Oh.
They call them honey agates because they're like the clear, like white or sort of
Oh.
yellowish color. And when the
Yep, yep.
sun hits them sometimes and you're out walking the river, they will literally glow. So
Oh,
it's
cool.
it's almost impossible if you go to Montana and you're in an area that has agates, if the rocks aren't covered in silt and people haven't completely picked it over, like you will find agates anywhere, and they will help train your eye to start identifying like, okay, waxy texture. They sometimes get those like C-shaped like chatter marks when the rocks kind of like tumble down the river. You start seeing like some of those features that are common in all agates, and you can then use that to try to find, Lake Superior agates, and any of those other agates that you might be interested in finding. So I anyone that wants to find more agates, I say go to Montana and find Montana agates, because they're easy to find, and you'll train yourself to find even more of them.
And it's such a vast amount of the Yellowstone River where hits really good. I will say, like, if you're going around Bozeman, the agates that kind of get dragged down here are a lot less like lackluster. I wouldn't even waste my time like going out to look around here.
So where would you say is an ideal spot again to look?
Like Glendive to Sydney, Miles City would be like the very beginning, but Glendive to Sydney would be like the hot zone.
Okay.
Yeah, you can start to sort of get good Montana agates. I know kind of around Billings. Like I found some around there because I like lived there. Did some of the gravel bars. But then when you get further downstream towards Forsyth and Miles City, that's where it really starts to pick up. And then as you get further down into Glendive, that's probably like the best. And that's when a lot of people see, like you've got some really good photos of like with the red in the Montana agates. Those are usually found that like downstream, like Glendive to Sydney area. And I will say too, anytime that you're around the Yellowstone River, you can find agates outside of the river. Like I have been up on a hill in Miles City and found them. And we go to the mineral club I'm in. We'll go to a private ranch in just outside of Glendive, and I have found like 5-pound Montana agates up on a hill,
Wow.
like I don't even know, maybe 5-10 miles away from the river. And some of it is from old river deposits, and some of it is from when the glaciers came down and kind of pushed things up and mixed things around. So,
Yep.
yeah. And we did have a question.
Yeah. I was gonna say for Mary, just to clarify.
Yeah, and
Mary.
so Mary Lee, which I think Amber,
Yes, I was
you've
gonna say, hey Mary Lee.
so she was asking if people have agate claims.
You could, but not of the Yellowstone agate. Yeah, it's just a like river rock kind of in the side of the banks. I don't think like the deposit even. I tried to read about it in one of Harmon's books, and it's not like a deposit you could like go and claim and then like dig out. It's all like eroded and in the river
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, I think I know of one agate claim in Montana, and I think it
Okay.
was it was down by the Pryor Mountains. It wasn't like a dry
Yep.
head claim. I think it was like TP Canyon or something like that. I know there was like a some kind of like agate claim that where they were coming like out of the mountains, and there was a deposit that they were digging out that that they did a claim for that.
That I didn't know about, but I do know the deposits over there. They're like the Pryor Mountain agates or the Bear Canyon agates is what they're called.
Yeah, because there's Bear Canyon, I think TP Canyon, and the Dry Head agates. Those are all those. They call them cold water agates because they form the limestones. And so there's difference. Like this is something like I've kind of talked about with people. So like the Yellowstone agates, the Montana moss agates, Lake Superior agates. Those all form, like a lot of the Oregon and California agates, those form in volcanic rocks. So you've got the space in a volcanic rock, and if it forms in a space that was left by a tree, you can get like limb casts and those types of features. Usually, gas bubbles. And those all form in volcanic rocks. And then you've got like your Bear Canyons. I think a lot of like some of them in the Mexican agates. Your Fairburn agates also formed in limestones. Those all formed in limestones, and they call them like sort of cold water agates. And there's also depending on who wants to be sort of a devil's advocate or just wants to like argue with people, some people will say like, well, they didn't form in a volcanic area and they're not, clear, so they're actually not agates, they're banded chert, which we can get into a whole discussion and probably get people upset, more upset than people trying to like jump in front of them on a beach. But those are just some of the things that like I know, like in Montana, like that's the one thing that I think people like if they ever want to do like a like rock hounding like road trip, Montana is great because you can, even just for agates, you've got bear canyons, dry heads, you've got Montana moss, throughout most of the state. And I think on the Madison there might even be some other like blue agates. I don't know if you've heard of
Yeah.
that.
Yep, the Madison blue. For
Sounds
whatever
like
reason,
oh,
it's
sorry.
like not as exciting to me because there's not patterns in it. And so it's just like, it's kind of like the holly blue. It's like similar to that, only different shade of blue. But
I was just wondering if anyone's ever kind of planned like agate trip where you just go from place to place to collect in Montana. Like that would be like a fun trip.
yeah.
Yeah, I've heard
I
of
know people
people.
come here for agate.
Yeah, I know some people will go like to Montana for agates. I've done like sort of trips like where I'm hopping around, where like I might like start like Billings, and then I'll go to Miles City, and then I've got some spots I go to in Terry, and then Glendive, and so on. But I don't know if I've heard of people like doing like just agates, and I think that would be really fun because you could even do
Yeah.
that. I think agates are found in almost every state. So you could even do like a road trip across the US and just
I
look for
mean, there's
agates.
like in Ohio, like I mean, there might be some carnelians, but like they're not. We're not busting out the seams with agates in Ohio.
Yeah.
But
Well,
like,
and
but you were just mentioning like all the different kinds that you can find in Montana, and I just think it would be cool just to like go to different ones and collect different agates there. It would be cool.
Yeah.
yeah, you could almost start like, so I know Montana has a dinosaur trail. So if you're interested, there's I think like 9 or so museums across the state that are part of what they call the dinosaur trail. So you can go and
Okay.
see dinosaur fossils. And I was talking to someone, and apparently some restaurants started a Montana burger trail. So
Oh,
they've got like bars and stuff that are supposed to have like some of the like best burgers in the state that you can
Oh,
go and like
funny.
try burgers. Because I will say, if you go to Montana, because there's I think 5 cows for every person in Montana, they've got
Sounds about right.
really good burgers, really good steaks. So yeah, we should start a Montana agate trail where people can go, Bear Canyon agate and
Yeah,
different Yellowstone eggs. Like that would be cool.
that would be
oh, we just
cool.
had this comment come in. Um, Not sure of your name, B10 Dodge 87, but they found agates at 8,500 feet. Wow.
Oh,
What
in
is
the
this
Bitterroot.
in the Bitterroot
Okay.
Valley? Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've
Uh,
known in near like the Yellowstone Park, they've actually like that was where I was doing research because I've given talks on Montana agates, and someone mentioned that they had found like a 30-pound Montana agate.
Oh,
But they had found it like up kind of like in the mountains. But I would guess that almost anywhere that you have any kind of volcanism, if you've got enough silica in the rocks that could leach into a hole, you could get an agate.
and I wonder too with the ancient like glacial flooding, how much that moves stuff around, or even I'm not a geologist, so like the timeline there, but
Yeah, and I know that's one sort of discussion because I've gotten into some arguments with people because I've done research on Montana agates, and I'll mention how we find them. They call them honey agates in Montana, and I found them myself. I've got some really cool, and I've done so much in Montana. If I throw them in a bucket next to any Montana agates, I will lose them and think they're all Montana agates. They've got the red coloring, they've got the dendrites, they look clear, all of that stuff, and people will be like, well, there's no way for them to get here because the Yellowstone goes up into Sydney, hits the Missouri River, cuts across North Dakota, and then goes down and connects to the Mississippi, nowhere close to Minnesota. And what people don't realize is in the past, what happened is the Yellowstone River flowed north and went into Canada, like up by like Regina, and then what happened was the glaciation happened and the glaciers pushed forward, and actually where you see the Missouri River, that's as far as the ice got. So like the Yellowstone River came up, hit that ice, couldn't go north anymore, so then it went to the east. And so all of that rock that was north of there that had the agates in it, all of that then got pushed down further. Some of it then came up into Minnesota, and that's where the those like honey agates and things in Minnesota come from, which I think is really interesting. Like to think about, if I find one of those agates in Minnesota, the volcanism happened like 250 million years ago, and then a hole had to form, and then the water had to get in there and precipitate out an agate, and then the rock had to be eroded away, and then the agate had to travel down the river all the way into Canada, and then a glacier had to come by and push it all the way into Minnesota, and then I had to make my way and just happen upon it and find it. And to me, it's just like a crazy story of like thinking
Yeah.
about everything that had to come together for you to find like an agate.
I had a friend once tell me that the crystals reveal themselves to who deserves them. So I was waiting just for you.
Yeah, I
I
could
believe that.
see. Yeah, like I know there's a lot of sort of like you make your own luck, and trying to do like like I'm digging is one really big thing, but like um sometimes you're just lucky. Have you had any times where you're like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe the luck I'm having, like just one of those like crazy good days?
Yeah. This is a little different, but I was taking a friend who isn't a rockhound up hiking, and we were looking for highlight opal, and so we're about like 5.5 miles deep on a trail. And I'm like, okay, we're in the zone. We just got in the cirque. I was like, start looking down, and I started describing what we're looking for. And not even 20 feet away from that spot, she found an arrowhead. And so that was really cool.
Yeah.
That was one of the like most surprising, and I was like, what the
And
heck?
she
It's not
wasn't
even what
even
we're
like
looking for.
and she wasn't someone who likes to or typically collects, right?
Nope, nope, just out there with me to have fun. And
Yeah.
yeah, and then she found like the coolest find of the year. And then, but yeah,
And then you're like, aren't you kind of
nothing.
like hoping maybe they'll give it to you because they don't really care?
No, not that time. I was like, I think if it had been anyone else, maybe.
Like I take my nephew out, and like I've gotten him into rock hounding, but like he's not like a diehard. I think he enjoys it, and he likes hanging out
Hmm.
with me, and he'll keep stuff. But I finally hit the year, and we've been doing it for several years, and we went out, I think this past summer. Oh yeah, we did. We were in Ontario, and we were collecting fluorescent sodalite, and he found a really nice one, and I just thought for sure he was gonna give it to me because I'm like, you don't really care about this stuff. And he's like, no, I'm keeping it. I mean, you don't really care. Like, why not give it to me? So that sometimes I guess it's probably just it's better to just let them keep it, but sometimes I just really wish like if you didn't really care about it, just give it to me.
But that's true.
Yeah,
That's like the envy of seeing what they find.
It's like they always the people who really don't care very much find good stuff.
It does happen. Their first time out and they find something amazing that you find maybe one for every 100 trips, and then they're
Yeah.
just hooked.
yeah,
Yeah.
that reminds me of when I was at Rocky Mountain College and we were in the Pryor Mountains and we were hiking along doing a geology trip, and there was someone who I'm not even sure if they were even like a minor in geology. I think they might have just taken it because they need a gen ed class. And they're just walking along, and they just like bend down and they pick up this rock, and then they're kind of like, whatever. And then they ask the professor, they're like, hey, like, what is this? And he's like, oh my gosh. He's like, I've never seen, it was an ammonite, about this big, but it was perfect. Like you could see all the ridges, like everything just
Oh.
perfect. He's like, I've never seen an ammonite out here. And this has to be like the perfect, like whatever, like the speech, like everything. He's like, it is such a good example or whatever. And the guy's just like, oh, okay, cool. Like, whatever. Like I was just like, it was slightly different, so I picked it up. And it's like, how could you not like love, like, it's amazing.
Yeah.
I know,
Definitely.
right? So Mary Lee had another question here about the opals.
So it's highlight opal. It's not like a Spencer, Idaho opal. It's more of like a, I'm not a geologist, so the chemical side of it, I don't know. But it reminds me of it looks like a bubbly glass on a volcanic rock is kind of what you're looking for.
And how
Yeah,
do
I
you
think
find them? Are they just kind of like surface collecting? Are you digging them?
Yeah, you can crack like rock to try to open it and see if stuff is inside, but I wouldn't recommend doing that because you have to hike so far to carry the tools. Not worth it.
Yeah, I think they call that like sort of common opal, so there's no fire
Okay,
or anything like you would see
correct.
in
Yep.
like the like Virgin Valley stuff. Like there's no fire, but
Mm.
I know
Nope.
like the highlight opal, and then like I've also gotten some from some like similar highlight opal from Wyoming. And it'll fluoresce like really cool, like
Yeah.
green.
But
So there
does it
is,
have a no play of color though, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
yeah, it's just sort of like a
Yep.
white, sort of like
It's
milky.
clear.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
Yep.
it's clear. Okay.
Sometimes it's a little milky, but it's mostly just clear, and you would never like do lapidary with it. It's just specimens.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it does have a really great glow, really pretty green.
And the specific stuff I go for, it's like there's a few hikes that are a little shorter, but like on average, it's like at least an 11-mile hike, so you don't see a ton of specimens.
So is that like one of the like further hikes that you do then to go in to try,
For
or like what's like the furthest that you've
Yeah,
like hiked in to find crystals?
about 13 miles, but that was backpacking, and that was in Idaho. I've backpacked and rockhounded a bit, but that would have been the farthest. Other than that, like 5 miles in is like more than enough when you're carrying rocks out.
Yeah, for real. For real.
Because I didn't even carry that many out that day, and it still felt heavy by the time we got back to the car.
So the 13-mile hike, like what were you looking for? Was it more like
That
quartz
the
crystals?
highlight opal.
Oh,
Nope,
the
the
opal.
highlight opal. Yep, yep. In Idaho, I was looking for quartz.
Okay.
Is it the halite opal? Is that like is Montana like kind of considered a main state for that, or is it kind of just like hit
You
or
know,
miss?
I don't know the answer to that. I know
Okay.
there's other locales of highlight opal, but highlight is also talking about like the locale name for that specific opal.
Okay.
So I'm not too sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I know if you pick up the like Rockhounding Montana book, I think they mention a spot for highlight opal in there.
Hmm.
Oh, okay. It
Yep.
looks like the miners girl said Utah as well.
Okay, yeah.
Hey,
Sweet.
miners girl. Hey, Carolyn. Let's see here. Um,
I read a comment from a gentleman saying that just because a mineral isn't documented, it couldn't be there. And that's exactly why I won't tell you where that fossil spot I found
I'm
is.
gonna, I'm
'Cause
gonna
it's
put that out there.
undocumented.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah. But that's one
Yeah.
of those things where it's like, are you gatekeeping info? Because I don't want to die with that, but I do want to hold on to it for a little while longer, until I
Yeah.
like let the world know. So
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like,
sometimes there's just odd things that people never knew before. Like there could have been like one of the really common things I've noticed in like some of the fossil sites I've been to is like it was like an old like lake. And so sometimes like if the whole area is like one kind of rock and then you have a lake, you'll have literally a pocket of something different. And that's where like like it's crazy the amount of stories of like the mammoth dig site in Hot Springs, South Dakota, or the gray fossil site in Tennessee of like they were doing construction and someone was driving a bulldozer and hit like a mammoth tusk that was like 10, 8 feet long or whatever it is. um there was actually I just remembered it right now. They actually just found one in a similar instance in North Dakota. They found a 7 foot long mammoth tusk like a couple weeks ago, and it's crazy like that. The only reason we found or knew anything was because some construction guy, one, happened to hit it, and two, actually told someone and didn't just like toss it in his pickup truck and take it home. And then of course the scientists come out and start looking, and then it's like, oh my gosh, this is like a huge thing. But no one before then had any idea it was there because it's such an isolated thing, and unless you happen to like do something to like drill a well or something where you could have exposed it, like you just, there's so many spots that who knows what's out there. We did get one question. Mary Lee was asking again about a blue rock in Idaho. And then she also mentions about like mountain lions and carrying protection. So the first part, I know we talked kind of about like the holly blues. Could that be what she's talking about, or do you know other
If
blue?
it's Idaho, she's talking about aquamarine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the blue that's famous there for sure.
Okay.
And then I'm not really scared of mountain lions. It's grizzly bears where I'm from. That's why we carry bear spray. Mountain lions are scary too, but most of the time, like if they're following you, you're not gonna see them. Whereas like a grizzly bear, he's gonna come after me in a more way. And then some of the spots I dig in or not even dig in, but I collect at, are really famous for like grizzly attacks.
So speaking of like some of the dangers and things, I know in Western Montana there's been like some earthquakes like throughout history. Have you experienced any earthquakes?
Yeah, in middle school, I actually got 2 more weeks of summer because our middle school, like part of the building, like collapsed during a earthquake, and they had to like do the construction to fix it. So we got a longer summer.
Wow. Like that's,
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of people don't realize like Montana actually has like quite a bit of earthquakes. It
A
was
lot of
really,
time we just don't feel them.
yeah, well, there's been some huge ones. I get a calendar every year from the
Okay.
The Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology.
Ooh,
And this year it was on the Hebgen Lake earthquake, which was in, I think, the
okay.
60s.
Okay.
And it's really cool. I actually did a geology trip there. The offset of where the fault was, where the earthquake happened, it was like 20 feet, and you can still go there, and it's like still like 12 feet high. Of like that was the offset of the earth. Like the earth literally moved
Huh.
like 20 feet.
I didn't know
And
that.
yeah, and so there's like landslides and all sorts of stuff. And even like going further back, I think like early 1900s. um like a lot of people are sort of confused because I went to school at Rocky Mountain College, which is in Billings, Montana, which is nowhere near the Rocky Mountains, but
Yeah.
their campus used to be in Helena, and there was a huge earthquake and the campus got like leveled. And then they decided we're just going to move the campus to Billings. And then
I've
they
never
like,
heard that.
yeah, and so I think
Huh.
initially they were called Polytechnical, like Montana Polytech. They actually were
Okay. Yeah,
formed
yeah.
before the state was actually became a state. So they're actually older
Huh.
than the state of Montana. But yeah, it's just
Crazy.
like a really interesting story because a lot of people don't think, like they'll think of like, Alaska, California, like, the Ring of Fire, like earthquakes, but Montana's had quite a few earthquakes,
Mm-hmm.
which just another interesting like Montana geology thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then you could like slip right into like Yellowstone being the volcano and like could erupt at any time. Because I remember in elementary, that's something that we would always like, someone would get teased about, and then the whole class would be in like dire, scared, like prepare. But
Yeah, and we had our season finale guest of season 2, Denali, who on TikTok goes by Dykenite, who's a PhD
Oh yeah.
volcanology student. Like she's
I
talked about
follow
like some
her.
of the like volcanology stuff where like people freak out about like Yellowstone's gonna erupt, and it's also like, well, no, not really. There's so many more like volcanoes, especially like in the Cascade region, that are way more likely, like Mount Rainier, Mount St. Helens type volcanoes that would erupt and cause a ton of issues. So, yeah. Yeah, there's just, I don't know. I like geology.
Yeah. It's one of those things, the more you know, the less you seem to know, because there's just like more avenues to learn in.
Right. So, do you like, so I guess on that vein, like, is there a lot of research that you do, like trying to study the geology to try to find like new locations to dig?
Oh my gosh. Yes and no. I have the hardest time reading geology books. It's such dry reading, and like the old records, like I could read the same paragraph 3 times and then maybe get like 2 sentences out of it. Um, no, I depend a lot on my dad, and then I've like all of Leland's records, going through those, and then like my best friend is my dig partner, and he's really knowledgeable, and he's had like amazing mentors himself. His name's Paul. He's probably like one of the other big diggers in our state. And yeah, just knowing people, and then just getting feet on the ground. Lots of feet on the ground. But yeah, there's a lot of resources out there if you like know the right places to look to.
Right. Well, it looks like we lost Amber. I know she was
Yeah.
kind of having some technical difficulties there. Um, we've been going for like an hour. It kind of flew by. Was there anything else that you like wanted to talk about?
I don't think so. I think we covered it all.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time. If there's anyone that wants to find more of Sally's stuff, her embroidery is um, I'm sorry, I just
You're fine.
it's the
It's Sally.
Sally Ann Creek Co. And that's Ann without an E, so ANN, SallyAnnCreekCo.com. And then she's also Sal Diggs MT on you can look up on Instagram, Facebook, any of those things. If you want to buy some crystals or embroidery, which she's got some really cool stuff. So check her out. So thank you again for sticking with us through all this and just
Yeah.
sharing your experience. This was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It was fun to be here.
Yeah, thank you. And so everyone knows, our next episode is coming up in 2 weeks on February 7th at 8:45 Eastern Time. And we are going to have Keely, who is a paleontological technician. So she does fossil prep. I actually just had a fossil prep by her. It was a nice, cool, they call them frog crabs from Oregon. So I'll show some pictures of that. And she does on it's a fossil talk on TikTok. She'll do like live fossil prep. So there's going to be a ton of really cool stuff to talk about with her. So tune in on February 7th for that. And I hope you guys all have a great night. So bye, everyone.
Bye.